This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian. I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
Look, some of us are lazy, alright?
If by lazy you mean wrong.
Prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide whether the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because guess what? This film is lit. Making friends, finding love, healing wounds, and a tunnel song. It's the perks of being a wallflower, and this film is lit. Before we get going, you'll notice Katie's mic has a slight hiss and weird audio quality to it. Not sure what's wrong with it. We're going to check it out and get it fixed for the next episode. I did my best to reduce it as much as possible. Hopefully it's not too annoying. Hello and welcome back to an episode of This Film is Lit, the show where we talk about movies that are based on books. This week's episode was a viewer choice, listener choice. Perks of Being a Wallflower won by one vote over
Nick and
Nora's Infinite
Playlist.
And both of them handily beat
The Fault in Our Stars.
So, we probably will eventually, we mentioned on the prequel, we'll probably do those eventually.
Yeah, I would
down
like to.
the road.
Yeah.
But for this one, we're doing The Perks of Being a Wallflower. If you want to know any more about that, check out our prequel episode. We had some fun facts, talked about when it came out, who directed it. Just a refresher, it was directed and written, adapted by the guy who wrote the book.
Yes.
Stephen Chbosky, or however you pronounce his name. So I think it's our first one where they're written and directed by the author of the book.
Yeah.
Which is pretty rare, especially the directed part, because usually authors don't really know how to direct.
We've had a couple where the author did the screenplay or at least helped with the screenplay, but this is our first one where the author directed, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
Directing is its own whole new different game. I guess I should have looked up during the prequel if he's directed anything else before or after that, because it's a particular skill, and it's interesting that...
Yeah.
Anyways, let's get into our, if you haven't seen the movie and you would like a little summary for our discussion, let me sum up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
We follow Charlie, a shy, quiet kid entering his freshman year of high school. We know he's had a rough previous year. We learn why over the course of the film. And we know he's hoping to make new friends at his new high school. The two of the people that he does eventually meet and become friends with are...
Patrick and Sam.
I couldn't remember. I wanted to say Sarah. Patrick and Sam, played by Emma Watson and Ezra Miller, respectively. We follow his journey as he meets new people, has new experiences, and comes to terms with his past. Really not a lot else to kind of explain. It's sort of not a slice of life, but there's not, without spoiling things, which we'll get into as we go, there's not a lot to sort of set up.
Yeah,
really.
There's not really like an overarching plot
per se. There is, but that's kind of the big to some extent
there is, but there are overarching themes,
and plot elements,
yes,
but they aren't really like, there's not like a thing going on, like
and you're right, I wouldn't necessarily call it a slice of life, but it's maybe like a year in the life of kind of a story.
Yeah, so that's kind of basically it. So let's get into our first segment. Guess who? Sorry, second segment. Guess who?
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay.
So we have two guess who's.
Okay.
And I hope you're going to get both of them.
All right. I believe in myself.
She has brown hair and very, very pretty green eyes. The kind of green that doesn't make a big deal about itself.
He says that in the movie, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
Yeah, okay. That's Sam. This character is Sam, yeah.
Yeah. And I laughed at that part. I don't think you noticed. because they literally just changed the
brown.
color of her eyes.
Yeah, they just changed it to Emma Watson's eye color, which is brown, yeah. Because I was like, when you said that, I was like, that sounds familiar. Does he say, he says it to her, doesn't he?
Yes, he says it to her face. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Interesting. Okay. Oof, nailed that one for one.
She is a very interesting person because she has a tattoo that symbolizes Buddhism and a belly button ring and wears her hair to make somebody mad.
That's very obvious. That would be Mae Whitman's character, I believe, Mary Elizabeth. Mary Elizabeth, yeah.
Close.
Yeah. The Buddhism. She's Buddhist. And her hair, yes.
Yeah.
She's a very distinct sort of punk rock haircut.
Yes.
And it's dyed in that sort of
like
thing.
half shaved.
Yeah, like almost like an undercut. Like in is it? Okay, we'll get to when this takes place.
Yes.
But I had a question about that. But yeah, she kind of has like almost like an undercut type of thing, and yeah, dyes it different colors, and it changes throughout the film several times because the movie does take place over the course of a whole school year, basically, and then all the way through the next summer, kind of to some extent. So cool. That was pretty easy. 2 for 2. Nailed it.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of character description in this. I was hoping that there would be
more, yeah, to
make it more interesting, but there was not.
Yeah, just the women apparently get
descriptions.
All right, let's move on to Send the Book.
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
This is where I have some questions. I actually added one, but I think it'll be easy.
Okay.
So I do, for spoiler, I send Katie the Was That in the Books and the Lost in Adaptation so that way she can double check and make sure she has answers. We didn't used to do that in the original episodes, but we're like, instead of just sitting here and you thumbing through the book.
Maybe we should just plan ahead a little bit, be a little professional.
Well, I originally liked the idea of sort of the surprise.
Yes.
But at the same time, I'm like, that doesn't make for as good of internet radio. We want to actually have answers here and not just Katie thumbing through a book going, maybe? So, first question. Do Emma Watson, Sam, and her stepbrother, who is Patrick, Ezra Miller's character in this movie, in the film, they have a moment at the homecoming dance. And it's pretty early in the film, first act. Mm-hmm. Like when it's after Charlie has become friends, at least somewhat friends with Ezra and Sam, or at least they've started talking some. Mm-hmm. And they're at the homecoming dance, and Come On Irene comes on. I think that's the name of it. That's the chorus of the song. I don't know if that's the name of the song. I'm pretty sure it is. Starts playing. And
wait, it's Come On Eileen.
Babe. Sorry, not Irene. Emma Watson's character, Sam, says, like, oh, they're actually playing good music. And her and Ezra Miller go dance, and they have, like, a choreographed
they called it
routine.
The living room routine.
Oh, is that what they said?
That's what they said in the movie, yeah.
Is that in the book?
It is not in the book.
They don't have a choreograph.
And holy God, that was cringy.
It was so weird.
It was so, like, I guess it was supposed to show how, like, connected they are and whatever, but... Jeez, okay, like, this is not an episode of Friends, okay?
It just seemed so strange to me for the type of characters they were, that they would... I guess not. I guess the reason he added that, or that change was made, I would think, because they are, and we see later throughout the film that they, like, perform together. They do the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which I have questions about that. They, like, perform the Rocky Horror Picture Show, like, every week or every month, I don't know, like, routinely at, like, the local theater. And so they're, like, performers. So the idea that they, like, as, you know, friends came up with a dance routine isn't, their relationship isn't a normal, because it's also they're step siblings. And so they're, like, their relationship isn't sort of a normal brother-sister relationship.
They're more like good friends.
Yeah.
Because they didn't, like, grow up
like,
together.
Just happen to live together. Yeah. And so, like, it made more sense, but at the same time, I was like, what?
Well... They're quirky with a capital Q.
Oh boy,
which I want to talk about at length.
Yeah. I have a couple. In our prequel episode, we played a game where we talked about tropes of teen movies and teen movies, young adult movies. And one of them was all writers are adults.
Yes,
and
God.
boy, oh boy, will we get to that at some point here, because that was a major problem with this film for me.
And I had a similar issue with the book.
And just a reminder, if you didn't listen to the prequel, all writers are adult, or most writers are adults trope is that most writers are adults. So when they're writing young characters, teenagers, high schoolers, it often feels like an adult writing those characters as opposed to how those characters, people in that age range, actually act and talk and that sort of thing, which I definitely felt a lot in this one.
Yes.
All right, second one for Was That in the Book? So first one, no choreographed dance routine to Come On, Eileen. Second, there's at one point we're introduced to Sam's boyfriend.
Craig.
She has a boyfriend, Craig, who's in college, I think.
Yes.
Because we'll set this up too. Sam and Patrick are seniors in high school, and Charlie, our main character, is a freshman.
Yes.
And he sort of makes friends with these upperclassmen because Charlie is also sort of more mature than his age type, I think is the idea that they're going for. And so it doesn't necessarily fit in with the kids his age group. Charlie also instantly falls in love with Sam, pretty much, in the movie. Emma Watson's character, Charlie, instantly falls in love with her. We're introduced to her boyfriend at some party, and they're talking about how Charlie wants to be a writer or is a writer or something like that. And one of the other people at the party goes, "Oh, do you remember what Sam's boyfriend's name is?"
It's Craig.
Craig, sorry, you said it earlier. "Oh, Craig, you write poetry, don't you?" And Craig responds in the best way ever if you want to make us not like a character. He goes, "Well, poetry writes me." Is that line in the book?
No.
Okay.
I don't remember it being in the book. I went back and checked a couple places and I couldn't find it, so I'm calling it not in the book.
I thought that was a pretty good way to instantly, because it's his introduction basically in the movie, and a pretty good way to make us really not like him he's not like a villain or anything, he's just a guy, but ultimately we find out he was cheating on her, but he's
obnoxious and insufferable.
And in exactly the way that a college freshman is.
Yeah.
Especially a college freshman who comes back and is visiting and hanging out with high schoolers.
Oh, I want to talk about that too.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, poetry writes me. I was like, oh boy, this guy. All right. Then we're going to jump way ahead. And I assume this does happen. It's pretty pivotal to the plot. At one point, there's a whole storyline where Ezra Miller's character, Patrick, as I said, he's gay, and he's
with the big football player.
He's basically secretly dating the head of the
big
captain
man
of the
on campus football popular
the captain
guy.
of the football team, the quarterback of the football team, and they've been kind of secretly dating. And at some point, to make a long story short, the football player's dad finds out and beats up his son, and then that causes the football player to sort of throw up a shield against Patrick. Anyways, Patrick starts getting picked on by other football players, and the football player he was dating calls him the F word.
Yes.
And then Patrick punches him.
Yes.
And then all the rest of the football players start beating the shit out of Patrick.
Yeah, we end up with a 5-on-1 situation.
It's like two dudes holding Patrick and one guy beating him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where are any teachers in this cafeteria? Right. Literally just a giant circle of students around a guy getting pummeled by 3 people, and there's not a single teacher to be seen.
There are nary an adult to be found anywhere in that cafeteria.
In this whole movie, there's there's so many times they're hanging out and partying and drinking at houses. I'm like, where are any of your parents? Nobody's parents is ever around. Ever. They have huge parties.
That's surely also a teen movie trope.
It is. We
need to look up the name of that one.
But I mean, when we went and hung out at people's houses, we would sometimes hang out in the basement and there weren't parents, but occasionally somebody's parents will go out of town and we might go hang out. But this is every time they hang out in this movie, there's never a parent there. Ever. They're not hanging out in the other room. It's just they're in the, they have the run of the house and they're opening fancy bottles of wine. And I'm like, what is this life that they're living?
To speak to that briefly before we get back to our other question. Yeah. The book does specifically, he specifically says at some point that he liked going over to Sam and Patrick's house because their parents left them alone.
Home. Yeah. Okay, yeah, and they are a pretty affluent neighborhood, and I think the implication being that their parents are off,
gallivanting or whatever
around.
Rich people do.
In the chalet for the weekend and that sort of thing, because they're all pretty rich, or relatively speaking, well off.
Yeah.
So okay, but back to my point. So all that happens, the fight, and Patrick is getting beat up, and then Charlie comes in and beats the shit out of 3 dudes.
Yeah.
And blacks out and doesn't remember any of it.
And
doesn't remember any of it and saves the day. And then it has zero repercussions. None of these students apparently have any. They go to the office, but I don't think anything happens to them. Again, it was the 80s. You could get. I assume it. We'll talk about it. I assume it was the 80s. I'm not exactly sure about that. But so does Charlie save the day and beat up all the bullies?
Yes.
Okay.
That is in the book. To speak to that a little bit, I think it does make more sense in the book because it's been pre-established that his brother taught him how to fight.
Oh, yeah, that's never...
Yeah, and we don't actually see the scene that I'm about to talk about in the book, but he discusses it, that there was an instance at the end of the previous school year where he beats up a guy for picking on him. So that's already been pre-established, so we know that he knows how to fight, and we know that he's capable of getting violent like that.
Yeah. That was an interesting thing I liked about the movie is the way they built that up. But that did, to me, him all of a sudden being able to beat up 3 dudes kind of came out of nowhere because I don't remember them mentioning that.
I don't think they did.
I also didn't realize that, and again, it's sort of the slow burn reveal of the movie, which I actually kind of liked that Charlie was dealing with these, like, rage, like weird,
well,
like, where he, like...
I mean, he's got, like, PTSD.
Yeah, well, yes, yeah. And he has, like, these moments where he, like, dissociates or whatever, I think might be the right term, without being a psychologist. But I think it's, like dissociates.
He like disassociates, the memory aspect of it, the aspect of him like blacking out during that fight isn't in the book.
Right.
He just doesn't talk about it. He's writing a letter, right? And he's like, I don't want to go into all the details.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess maybe he doesn't remember it, but they don't specifically say that he, like, blacked out in the book.
Because they say that in the movie several times, that he, like, he's
I mean, and that element is present in the book, just not in this specific instance. Okay. And they do get, some of them get suspended and some of them get detention in the book. Just
I'm sure that does happen in the movie, we just don't see it. Like, it's fine. Is the tunnel song... So there's this whole element, I shouldn't just say is this whole song. There's this whole element where in the beginning of the movie, or not in the beginning, like the first time or second time they hang out, him and Patrick and Sam all hang out. They're driving in a truck. They're driving through a tunnel, and a song comes on that they don't recognize, and they're all really into music.
Yeah.
And like sort of obscure, interesting music.
Oh God, yeah. I want to talk about
not
that too.
Top 40 music, like plebs, but like us plebs that like Top 40. But and the song comes on, I'm like, what is this? I've never heard this before. And then Emma Watson gets up and is standing in the back of the truck, sort of embracing youth and blah, blah, blah. And there's a line where he says, we are infinite, which we'll talk about in a second. Like, in this moment, we are infinite. The song, as it turns out, is Heroes by David Bowie, we find out at the end of the movie. Because she finds the song. But so that's the whole premise of this film is that not premise, it's not really important, but is this whole thing with their friendship is they don't know what this song they heard on the radio during this moment was. And I'm like, boy, that's when the first time I realized, like, what year is it? And then
because they don't just Google it.
They don't just Google it. And then I started seeing the cassette tapes, and I was like, oh, is this? But then I wasn't sure if maybe they were just hipsters and liked listening to music on cassette tapes. I legitimately, for a long time, and I have this in my Lost in Adaptation section, could not figure out when this was supposed to take place.
Okay, but I want to talk about that, but we'll get to it.
All right. But is the song Heroes by David Bowie, is that the tunnel song?
No. It's Landslide by Fleetwood Mac.
Oh. That's also pretty... obvious to me. Here's the reason I had to wonder is because to me, as soon as when they didn't know what the song was, I assume they all know who David Bowie is.
You would think.
As soon as he starts singing, it is very apparent that it's a David Bowie. He's got a
pretty distinctive sound.
Yeah, it is pretty obvious that this is a David Bowie song. Now, I mean, sure, you still have to figure out which one, but I was like, it narrows it down pretty far. So I thought that was interesting. And now, funny, because Landslide by Fleetwood Mac is also a pretty distinct... Fleetwood Mac has a pretty distinct sound as well. Maybe not quite as distinct as David Bowie, but yeah. And
I will say, too, to kind of speak to that a little bit, this element of them... like being obsessed with obscure music isn't really present in the book.
Oh, okay.
Not like it is in the movie.
Not like it is in the movie, yeah. Because it's a big part of the movie is them sort of... They're like super into, cool music. Yeah. Like, oh, you actually listen to good music? Like, it's like a line said unironically by a lot of characters in this movie.
Which is a high schooler thing.
Yeah, it is. It's totally a high schooler thing.
It's totally a high schooler thing. But it's also a little bit ironic since we spent so much time on the prequel episode talking about not being a snob.
Yeah, right. Don't be a snob. Yeah, exactly. And then, our main characters are all snobs. But also not in a very endearing way, in the movie at least. They're also...
they're high schoolers.
They're high schoolers, but they're also very, which is kind of one of the things I'm going to talk about with most writers are adults. That their emotional maturity of a lot of our main characters in this movie was something that didn't strike me as high schoolers, and the way they sort of are very accepting of each other, and like, or at least amongst the friend group of these main characters, and sort of the way they relate with each other felt not like high schoolers to me.
I agree with that.
Like the way they sort of. Like, especially, like, there's a whole, and I didn't talk about this, but I guess we can add this to Was That in the Book, because it'll be obvious. At one point, Sam, Emma Watson's character, finds out that Charlie has never kissed a girl. Mm-hmm. And she goes, look, I'm going to kiss you because I want your first kiss to be with somebody that loves you. And, like, and they, like, are very, like, that weird thing of, like, they have a very platonic love. I mean, eventually it changes, but, like, there's this weird thing where they, like, a very mature, like... Mm-hmm. We love each other as human beings type of thing that I don't remember ever most people having that sort of emotional depth when they were 15 years old to be like, wow, you know what? We should share this moment with each other and kiss because we both two humans that love each other. And like, I don't know.
Maybe it's because they don't listen to Top 40.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. It just to me struck me as like, wow, that's a really... It seems like a very mature, emotionally mature perspective for a couple high schoolers, and one of which is a freshman.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that happen in the book? Does she kiss him? And is that
yes, and I want to talk about that scene more later.
Okay. My final one for Was That in the Book. So it's a different song, but still there is a tunnel song. And is that, just to go back on it real quick, is there a whole element of them trying to figure out what that song they heard was? Oh, that's not. Okay, so okay. But it is like, is it like a book in the movie kind of like where it comes on again at the end of the film or the end of the book?
No.
Okay. Cause that's a whole kind of thing is that like, that's how the movie ends is they're sort of reunited after a summer, and they've all been through a lot of things, and they sort of reunite and then they're driving through the tunnel again and they put the song on because at this point Emma Watson's character has figured out what it is and has it on a cassette tape, and so they pop it back on and recapture that moment. So it's not the same sort of two-part moment in the book that it is in the film of them finding this thing together when they first become friends and then finding it again at the end of the story. Okay. Final one. Does Charlie or whoever have a line about feeling when they're driving through the tunnel? Charlie's, I guess, writing. It's a voiceover. And he says, in this moment, we are infinite or something like that.
Yes.
Is that in the book?
Yes, it is.
Did he come up with that? Or is that is he taking that from somewhere? Or is that like a quote? Or did he?
I mean, we are to believe he came up with it.
Okay, that's what I mean. Yeah.
He just says it. He doesn't like attribute it to anyone or anything.
Right. I just didn't know if it was like a famous quote I was unaware of.
Yeah. That one, and I actually want to bring up the quote about being infinite, and then there's another one, we accept the love we think we deserve.
Right, yes.
That are like the two big quotes from this
from the
book/movie.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that people like make graphics of for their Tumblr pages.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not to knock Tumblr, I like Tumblr. But you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting, actually, was that in the movie, both of those ideas come back at the end, but they don't in the book.
Yeah.
Like, both of those things happen within the first 50 pages of the book, and they don't really come back as, like, overarching thoughts within the narrative.
Which I think, and we can get to it later, but I think that was probably a good change. You did to have that sort of, a couple thematic through lines. Yeah. That come back and inform character relations throughout the film, and not, I mean, with the We Are Infinite one, not so much character relations as just sort of almost the, what's the Latin phrase I'm looking for? Thesis. Holy shit. I'm an idiot. the We Are Infinite line kind of comes across almost as the thesis of the film of because it represents when he's talking about it, sort of represents the way you feel as a teenager in those moments. It's similar to feeling, like when you're a kid and you feel invincible.
Yeah.
And those moments seem to just extend beyond even what you can perceive when you're like in a moment, like in that particular moment where they're listening to this incredible song and they're as happy as they've ever been, basically, and together. And, it's sort of those moments in life that we all strive to find as often as we can.
Yeah.
And they happen a lot when you're a teenager because it's all new then. Like
yes.
it's all real new.
Those moments where you feel invincible, immortal, where you feel like you're connected to everything.
Yes. Yeah. And so they use that really just 2 times for the We Are Infinite one to kind of in the beginning and then also at the end to kind of sum up and sort of recapture that moment. But yeah, I think that was a good idea to do that with those elements and to reintroduce them.
The one about we accept the love we think we deserve, I would say has more of a through line in the book. Yeah. But it doesn't come back in such an obvious way as it does in the movie. Like in the movie, he repeats it back to Sam.
Late in the film, he just says it to her. Yeah,
that doesn't happen in the book.
Yeah. But that is still probably basically what... But that is still probably basically what happens with their relationship is like that's the idea behind we accept the love we think we deserve is sort of what defines their relationship with each other, kind of.
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whether or not he states it to her.
Yeah.
Like that's sort of the vibe is that she hasn't, or she has always felt that way, and then thus because she's dealt with self-esteem issues and that sort of thing, and has trauma and that sort of stuff that she's kind of had to come to terms with. That was all I had for Was That in the Book. Let's get along to Lost in Adaptation.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
Okay, this is the big one. When the hell is this movie set?
Okay. I'm so glad that you're bringing this up because I really want to talk about it.
Okay.
Because the book, as I've said, is all him writing letters. So we know to the day when it takes place, because he dates them all. Okay. But having watched the movie now, I want to ask you first, when do you think this is set?
Boy, oh boy. So, okay, was such a struggle for me, because I didn't know that this wasn't set in 2010, or like whenever the movie, or like late 90s, or like whenever the book came out or whenever the movie came out. I thought it was contemporary. Like to whenever the thing was produced. So like I figured this was set in like 2010 or so. And then as I went on, like I said earlier, I was like, what? I had a lot of cassette tapes. And I was like, okay, maybe
but they are kind of hipster.
But they're hipsters, so like maybe they just like cassettes or whatever. But then like, and the music they're into, you can't tell because that's the same kind of thing hipsters in high school could be into now. Which is one of the reasons it's successful is that it can be, it kind of translates forever. But my guess, the other thing was the fashion didn't stick out to me as super 80s. Like some of the elements were, but they also, again, they're hipsters. So they could just be like, I couldn't tell. And then he just drives a generic truck. Patrick just has a generic truck. Like it's hard to tell from his car. So but then I got to the point eventually where I was like, okay, this has to be like the 80s or something. So my guess is like 86.
Okay. So before I reveal when this takes place, I want to say that I, too, found it very interesting that they downplayed the time period that this takes place in for the movie, because you're right, the clothes and the hair are very non-specific.
No, they're not. Yeah.
And if I had just watched the movie without having read the book, I would have guessed that this took place, honestly, around like the same time when we were in high school.
Yeah.
Like the early 2000s-ish. Because mixtapes were maybe not so much a thing, but they were kind of still a thing if you didn't have access to like a CD burner.
Yeah.
And there is a lack of technology in this movie.
Yeah.
Nobody has a cell phone.
No.
And now when we were in high school,
fair,
I mean, some people had cell phones, but it wasn't a thing yet, like it was like it is now.
Most people had them, but you didn't really use them very much because
they weren't a device that you used for everything.
Yeah,
because
you could just make calls and you could play Snake on it or whatever. Like so
even really like texting hadn't super caught on yet.
It existed, but it wasn't like super prolific.
Yeah. But the book takes place from 1991 to 1992.
Okay, that actually makes more sense.
And I think, as far as the movie goes, one of the only things I noticed that felt very specifically 90s was the fact that Mary Elizabeth makes a zine.
Yeah, there is that one part where they say something about a zine. And I was
that's
like,
a very 90s thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that was very 90s. And then, because Charlie's clothes could not be more generic.
Yeah.
Like, he just wears jeans and t-shirts, like, or whatever, like slacks and t-shirt. Like, you could not be more, like, not set in the time period. And also, I think 90, that makes sense because I think that might have been just I don't know, I was 3 at the time. But 91, 92 makes sense because I could see that being right in between the super 80s moment and when things really hit the 90s moment where it was kind of in between and the style had not yet defined itself again.
We're kind of maybe a little bit coming out of the punk type stuff, but we haven't really hit grunge yet.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. But yeah, man, I could not... I was like... nothing really stuck out to me as like super... There was moments here and there with some of the decor and stuff, but even that didn't feel... Because like when you watch something like Stranger Things or when you watch those shows, it is so obvious.
Yes. Everything screams this is set in a particular time period. And I wanted to bring that up too, actually, because I thought it was so interesting that they downplayed the decade that this takes place in, because this came out 5 years ago, 6 years ago?
2012.
2012? Okay. Yeah. But I would bet if this was made now, it would be 90s nostalgia everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, Emma Watson would always wear a scrunchie, and they'd be eating Lunchables and Dunkaroos at every cafeteria scene.
Yeah. No, it 100%. It was interesting because nostalgia bait it blew up so big in the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, it always has been a thing. Like, I Love the 80s was a huge TV show.
Yeah.
All through our high school time and whatever. But even more so with Stranger Things, with Everything Sucks, with dozens of other shows.
It's really trendy right now.
And people really buy into it. And you think if with it being set when it would make a lot of sense just for pure sales alone to lean harder into that nostalgia of the time period, because it also makes sense for the people that they would think would go see this movie, because there are people probably in their late 20s, early 30s in 2012 were, in middle school during this time, or during, the early 90s, or maybe not middle school, but like they're growing up through the 90s. And if you leaned it into the 90s, it would be, you'd be selling it to the right audience. Or like to the right current age range to some extent.
And I think there might be a couple factors at play there. We haven't really... There have been like a couple properties, but we're kind of still within the 80s nostalgia. Like what is... It's the 30-year cycle. The 30-year cycle. So we're kind of still within the 80s. Yeah. And maybe they were just trying to make it timeless.
Yeah, I think they were. And I think that was actually really clever, because that was kind of what I touched on earlier, is that I think doing it the way they did, where they don't lean into any of the nostalgia super hard, and they don't have a bunch of very obvious tells for when it takes place, does make it more timeless.
Yeah, there are almost no markers of time period in this.
Very little, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a... Boy, I was so confused about when this took place. Second, Lost in Adaptation. Is their group of friends called the Wallflowers? I guess this could also be, was that in the book? Because in the movie, there's a point where he first meets up with, kind of like when he goes to that party or whatever with Patrick and Sam and their other friends that first time. They say like, welcome to the Wallflowers Club, or something like that. He calls like their group the Wallflowers. It's the only time it's ever mentioned. And I was like, oh, is that? I didn't realize the movie title, like the title was somehow actual. I thought it was just like, he is a wallflower. Like, we all know what the term wallflower is. Somebody, shy, reserved, whatever. I just thought that was what it was talking about. I didn't think it actually manifested in the movie / book.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you on your roll there.
Okay.
Because you misunderstood that.
Oh.
But I totally understand why you misunderstood it because of the way it plays out in the movie.
Yeah.
So what happens in the movie is that he's at the party and Patrick is like, raise a glass to Charlie.
Yeah.
He's a wallflower.
Yeah.
So when he does that, he isn't like inducting him into their club.
That's what it felt like in the
I know,
movie
it is
to me.
what it feels like. He's literally just saying that Charlie is a wallflower.
Right. Okay.
And it's weird. The way it played out in the movie was so weird to me because like we've touched on who does that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, again,
really seriously, like who does that?
Yeah, not well, I guess they're seniors, so maybe, but
Yeah.
still yeah.
There is a toast in the book. It feels a lot less weird and cringy to me. Because, like, what happens in the book is that they're at the party and Patrick is talking to Bob, their stoner friend.
Yeah.
And he says something about Charlie and he says, like, oh, he's a wallflower. He notices everything or something like that. And then Bob is high and Bob is like, everybody raise a glass to Charlie.
Yeah.
He's cool.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I was like, again, that's why I put it in Lost in Adaptation, because I thought it could just be that. I mean, I definitely thought, like, okay, maybe he's just describing him as a wallflower. But the way it played felt a little bit like that was, like, what they called their
It
group.
does feel a little like a pinning ceremony.
Yeah.
Like, welcome to the Wallflowers, kid.
Yeah, I was like, all right, sure. But I wasn't sure. That's why I put it here. These are two more things that I think aren't super clear in the movie, and probably on purpose, and they don't need to be clear. I should have mentioned this earlier. I actually really liked this movie. I thought it was really, really good. I thought the acting was really, like, brilliant by most of the people in the film, particularly Logan Lerman, who plays Charlie. I thought he was fantastic. Oh, we've seen him before. He was
Percy Jackson. Yeah.
Percy Jackson, so...
This was a much better adapted property.
Yeah, and he got a lot more room to sort of shine in this film. But I thought everybody was really great. We'll talk about Emma Watson's accent later, but a little bit. But just to reiterate, I really did think the movie was really good, and it had just really interesting things to say, and it wasn't really what I was expecting, and it went directions I wasn't expecting because I didn't know anything about this, and it really hit some interesting beats for me that I thought was really cool. I don't think it necessarily fits with a bunch of within the age range they were in necessarily, but we kind of, anyways, it's not important. Here's a question I had. So one of the whole premises, and we talked about this as an epistolary novel, is that Charlie is writing letters to a friend. And now I may have misinterpreted or misheard or not noticed in the movie. My inclination in the movie was that he's not actually writing to anyone. He's just sort of writing these letters as an exercise for himself as a writer. And I didn't feel like we ever got any more information on what these letters are or why he's writing them or if they're to anybody or not. Is that expanded upon at all in the movie? Because my other idea was that because we find out at one point that his best friend up until this point killed himself like the year before, and so I'm like, well, maybe he's writing it to him and just or her and just saying friend instead of that person's name, or you know what I mean? Like, and so I'll leave it there. Is there any explanation or any more on the letters?
So we never specifically find out who he's writing to. The book does state a couple times that he mails the letters.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
well,
but
that's
it doesn't say to who. There are a couple of places in the book that are maybe supposed to be clues. There's a line at the beginning, and this line made it into the movie. I don't know if you caught it or not.
I might not have. I don't know.
At the very beginning, when he's writing that first letter, there's a line about, like, you didn't sleep with that person at that party, even though you could have.
Yeah, I do remember that.
And then there's more at the end. Like, at the very end of the book, he talks about how, like, after his friend committed suicide, he heard another girl talking about, I heard another girl talking about you, and I thought you sounded like you were a good listener, or something like that. So, those are potentially clues. I did a little bit of extra digging on this, and I went and looked at, like, a fan theory thread.
Oh, I'm interested. I'm really glad to know that this is like a thing.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't just like, it doesn't matter, dummy. Why are you asking?
It sounds like the two prevailing theories are, like you said, that they're letters to himself.
Yeah, that's kind of what I always thought.
Well, I guess 3 prevailing theories. Letters to himself, letters to his friend who committed suicide.
That was my other thought.
Another prevailing theory is that it's supposed to be the reader. And then somebody on this particular thread that I looked at, it was on the page for this book on Goodreads, so you can probably go find it if you're interested. Somebody claimed to have been to like a meet and greet with the author, and the author said that it was supposed to be somebody in the world of the book, but wouldn't say who.
Well, I will say with like you said, the line early on, because I do remember that line from the movie about, and I thought that was weird because I'm like, oh, who is that? Who is that? Like, I didn't know who he was talking about. Like, oh, you didn't sleep with that person at the party or whatever. Huh. That's interesting. Because we see, and again, there could be stuff told out of order or something in the movie that we're on, because we see him writing his first letter at the very beginning of the movie before he has met any of these people.
Yeah.
As far as I know, right? Like, he's writing that first letter.
Yes.
Before he ever meets Patrick or Sam or any of that friend.
The letters are in chronological order, at least in the book.
Right.
I mean, the movie could have changed things up, but...
Oh, so in that case, he's writing letters... he's absolutely writing letters before he meets any of these
he's writing
people.
letters before any of the events of the book.
Okay, so it's not like Mary Beth, or it's not some other character that we, met that he could be...
At least not that we know of.
Okay, interesting.
So it's a mystery.
It is a mystery. That's
like
fun.
I said,
that
thread was on the Goodreads page for this book. So if you listen to our episode and you feel like you want to go have a look at that, it's there. You can find it.
Yeah. My other last thought on that would be that it could be. I like the idea that since he does want to be a writer, we know this about him. Mm-hmm. That although the meet and greet with the author maybe changes that, but that it would make sense that he's writing them to the reader in the sense that as a sort of a narrative for this kid wants to be a writer, and he's actually writing a book and sort of experimenting with this weird form where it's him writing letters to the reader. I don't know. I thought that could work. Yeah, I didn't think that was going to be nearly as interesting when I wrote that question down as it turned out to be. So, all right, final Lost in adaptation, and I don't know if we get any more of this in the movie, and it's not really necessary, or in the book, it's not really necessary. I didn't need any more. I just was kind of wondering. So this whole thing culminates with Charlie. Progressively throughout the book, we get more and more clues to the fact that, like his friend killed himself last year, and that he's Charlie, and he keeps having conversations with his mom and stuff, or with himself. I can't even remember about sort of the bad thoughts and the darkness, and like sort of dealing with bad thoughts and that sort of thing. It becomes pretty clear that he's dealing with some sort of mental health issues of some sort. And we eventually find out, and it culminates, that he was sexually assaulted by his aunt throughout his whole childhood, which was a crazy reveal. I actually saw it coming, because they do. I think the movie does a pretty good job of dropping hints in a way that I felt smart figuring it out, but it also felt like well done, where you wouldn't necessarily see that coming. Anyways. And so he's been sort of, like you said, suffering from PTSD and a whole host of other sort of whatever issues from this. Ultimately boils up to a point where he like freaks or has a breakdown. I think that's how they describe it in the movie. And in the movie, we see him storming around. He's on the phone and he's like sweating and like tearful. And he calls his sister and is like saying basically like I killed Aunt Lisa or whatever her name was. Aunt Helen. Maybe I wanted her dead or something like that. And then she calls and sends the cops to their house. And then we see him look at like a kitchen knife, and then it cuts. Basically, the cops kick in the door, and then it cuts to him in the hospital with the doctor walking in the door, and we're now moved past that event.
Yes.
My question is, did he try to kill himself? Is that ever explained in the book? 2, was it more of just he had a breakdown and considered it for a moment? Is there just any more about what really happened in that moment, or was it just like a breakdown?
So the movie is purposefully vague.
Yes.
The book is also purposefully vague.
That's what I figured.
So that happens. This book is divided into 4 or 5 sections, like big chunks. Yeah. And then there's a short epilogue at the end. So that scene happens at the end of the very last section. And it does read a little bit like a suicide note. Like, he keeps saying, like, I have to go now, I'm sorry to have bothered you, that kind of thing. Then when we flip the page to the epilogue, I'll just read the first couple lines. And that last letter, I do want to mention, too, the last letter before the epilogue also ends with goodbye. And up until that point, they had not.
Right.
So it does read a little bit like a suicide note.
Yeah.
And then the epilogue opens up with, I've been in the hospital for the past 2 months. They just released me yesterday. The doctor told me that my mother and father found me sitting on the couch in the family room. I was completely naked, just watching the television, which wasn't on. I wouldn't speak or snap out of it, they said.
Okay.
So
that, to me, doesn't necessarily feel like he actually... Well, depending on... I mean, if he, like, took some pills or something that we don't know about in the book. Because in the movie, the implication is that he sees a knife sitting on the counter. And they also allude earlier that his aunt had similar...
like, almost immediately before this scene, they show a flashback and you can see the scars on his aunt's wrists.
That his aunt had tried to kill herself at some point. And so they kind of tie those in, that, you know, kind of setting that up. Mm-hmm. But then I looked, and you definitely don't see... It could be months later, so who knows? But you don't see any apparent wounds or bandages on him or anything like that when he's in the hospital after that point. And now we don't know exactly how long he's been there, but... Okay, I was just wondering. It doesn't matter. It's not important.
Yeah.
Like, the whole element is... It's still the same thing. Like, it's still, you know... The sort of breakdown is what's important, and him coming to terms with all this stuff. I was just wondering... Because it was so... Yeah, it was so intentionally vague in the movie. I was like, what happened there? So.
Right. No, yeah, you're right. The important thing isn't whether or not he tried to commit suicide.
Not at all.
It's the fact that he has this breakdown and then gets help and starts dealing with these issues.
Yes, I agree.
Before we move on, I have my own... It isn't really a Lost in adaptation because this wasn't in the book, but I just want to see if you know what the fudge this was about.
Okay.
So, in the scene where he takes LSD...
Yeah.
And then I think it was Sam, like, gives him a pair of glasses to wear.
Yeah, I don't know.
What?
I think that's...
Here's is that an LSD thing that I just don't know about because I'm a square?
Yeah, I think that is. Again, it seems like... I mean, I guess I just lived a sheltered life as a high schooler, but it seems like something that a high schooler who's, even if they've done LSD a couple times, wouldn't necessarily know. I guess maybe they have older siblings who know that kind of thing. My understanding, and I'm winging this because I don't know a lot. I've never done LSD. But I think the idea is that when somebody is tripping like that, if you give them something and go, this will help, it tricks their brain into going, oh, I'm okay now.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. You're
like, here, put these on. They'll protect you. And they're like, oh, yeah. Like, that's my guess on what that is.
All right.
I would say that's a pretty smart thing for her to know. Like, it's good for her to know that. And I get, and like I said, they have older siblings that may know that sort of thing or whatever. Because they didn't have the internet back then. Now you can look that up on the internet.
Right.
Like, what should I do if my friend's tripping and freaking out? Oh, do it. But like back then, you had to all know all that stuff through secondhand, basically, and from like people that you met. But yeah, that would be my guess. They aren't really anything. It's just she knows how to handle somebody on a bad trip. All right, let's move along to better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
So I have a few things here, and most of what I felt was better in the book were like the way that themes and like through lines and overarching ideas were handled.
Yeah.
Is most of what I liked better about it. But I've got a couple things. His friend who committed suicide, Michael, it's a bigger element in the book, as I feel like it should be.
Yeah.
And it's not revealed to us by him, like, out of the blue saying it to Sam at the party. Yeah. We already know that this has happened, like, at the very beginning. It's one of the first things he talks about in the book. Yeah. Is, like, the fallout from that happening and him trying to, like, grapple with it. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was better handled in the book. I felt like the movie downplayed it in a weird way.
Yeah, it did slightly. I liked the way because that was one of the things that I mentioned earlier. I liked the way that they slowly fed us his backstory over the course of the film, to where and I think that it ties into a very important theme that you never know what's truly going on inside somebody's head. Like somebody can seem, because like Charlie, like early on, he's a very quiet, shy guy, but you wouldn't, when we see him interacting and you know, when he first starts making friends with Patrick and them, he seems fine.
He's he's a little awkward.
Yeah, but he seems like he's okay. Yeah. But it, you know, that's the thing, is that you never truly know what all is going on inside a person. And I think by slowly revealing the backstory to us over the course of the film, and not, because early on, like there's the moment, and I actually had this written down in Lost in Adaptation, but then they explain it where when he meets the teacher the first time, played by
Paul Rudd.
Ant-Man, yeah. The teacher goes, I heard something about, I know you had a tough year last year. And I'm like, what? What is it? Because at that point, we don't know that his friend had killed himself.
Right.
And I'm like, so what does he know about, like, you know what I mean? And sort of that throughout was really interesting to me.
And the book does that with a lot of other elements. Yeah. And I wouldn't have necessarily minded if the movie had just not front-loaded the stuff about his friend committing suicide. But I felt like they mentioned it and then, like, kind of dropped it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they decided to focus on other things. Yeah. But yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay, so I have down the thing about the toast, which we already talked about.
Oh, yeah, at the party. I thought you meant like actual physical toast, and I was like, what?
And then just like, I don't know if this is a good place to talk about it or not, but the movie versions of these characters are like so much more insufferable than the book versions.
Yeah.
Just like the music thing and like the way that they talk. And like I said, that element is present in the book too. It's very much all writers are adults.
Right. Well, and in the book, isn't it all letters? So we're all getting it from the perspective of Charlie. So it's like him talking about what they did and what they...
Right, definitely. And he is very much an unreliable narrator.
Yeah. So I guess my thing with that is that, yeah, it was always going to translate a little strange when you're going from third-hand accounts to actually seeing the events taking place. You know what I mean? To where that might always read more insufferable when you're actually watching the characters do it than when you're listening to somebody describe what they kind of did. You know what I mean?
It's a fair point. Although I did still think that kind of oddness came across in the book. But this book, I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say that I was thoroughly invested in it, but I did enjoy it. But it was hard to read.
Yeah.
The prose style was difficult to read because we are getting it all secondhand, and I know the author did this on purpose, and I'll tip my hat to him for achieving this. But we're getting it all secondhand, and it creates like this weird, uncomfortable, like out of body experience throughout the whole book.
Yeah.
And I get it. But it is difficult to read. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah. Okay.
A couple other things. Help me remember how the movie resolved the plot line with the sister's boyfriend.
Oh, I don't think it did.
I don't think it did either because I can't remember it. That definitely gets resolved in the book.
It may have, but I don't remember. Like maybe she just leaves him. I don't remember.
I think she does just break up with him, but like their parents find out in the book because Charlie mentions it to his teacher.
To set up what we're talking about, in case you don't know, Charlie's sister is dating a guy, and at one point Charlie sees the guy hit her.
Yes.
And his sister's like, don't tell parents, he's not going to hit me anymore or whatever. And then we kind of do lose that storyline.
Yeah,
I feel like we kind of lose it. Like we see them a couple more times, and maybe she does break up with him, I think, but I don't remember.
Yeah. And we lose that a lot less in the book. Yeah. Like I said, he mentions it to his teacher, and then of course the teacher reports it, tells his parents, as you should. Yeah. So they, the parents kind of like step in and they call the boy's parents, and they're like, no, you can't see him anymore. And she continues to date him in secret for a while. High schoolers.
Right.
And then eventually, closer to the end of the book, like kind of comes to term with what a dick he is on her own, and leaves him. Which brings me to my next thing that I want to bring up, which is that in the book, he helps his sister get an abortion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not even touched upon in the movie.
That's not an element at all.
That is a, dropped storyline.
Yeah. Which, I get why they dropped it. It's certainly something very controversial.
See, I don't think we talked about this though. Although I think she ultimately ends up not getting it, if I remember it correctly. But this was produced by the same people that produced Juno, so they're not scared of that story.
Right.
I think they just dropped it for a lot of things going on already.
Right, and that's the next thing that I was going to bring up is that there are already a lot of balls in the air.
Yeah, and that's a less important ball to the main story.
Right.
So.
But I did think that it worked thematically for the book.
Yeah.
Which I'll get to in a second. And it created like a nice, it was a nice relationship building moment for him and his sister.
Yeah, we don't get a lot with them in the movie.
Yeah, his family that's not where the focus is for the movie. And it's not where the focus is either for the book. But I thought it was nice to kind of have that element, at least with one of his family members.
Yeah.
So I mentioned themes. And one of the big themes in the book, which does come through in the movie, but I thought the book handled it better, was the idea of keeping secrets.
Yeah.
And like how keeping a secret can kind of fester and like you rot from the inside out. Mm-hmm. Keeping secrets or just, not talking to people about things.
Yeah.
Kind of a similar idea there. And like I said, that is present in the movie. I thought it was better handled in the book. There were more elements of it. There were more instances here and there with different things.
Yeah.
I also thought the book did maybe a better job of portraying his mental illness.
Yeah, I don't know.
I didn't think the movie did a bad job.
Yeah, I thought it seemed like it did a pretty good job.
But I thought
suffered myself ever really.
I thought that the book kind of maybe built it a little better. It was like spread a little more evenly throughout. That we got these instances of seeing something happen.
Yeah,
that's all I have.
All right.
So we'll move on to better in the movie.
Let's do it.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
So Sam's backstory. There is more of her backstory in the movie. The book is pretty vague. She tells him a story at one point about how her first kiss was when she was 11.
Yeah.
And then she says it was one of her dad's friends.
Yeah.
Which is pretty heavy shit.
Yeah, it is.
That's not in the book. I do think it fits thematically, and it also helps explain why she insisted on being his first kiss.
Yeah.
I still think it's a weird moment, though. To me, it's an odd moment. It's admittedly a little less weird than it is in the book with that backstory present.
I think it's a very important... Wait, which part's weird?
The part where she just insists on being his first kiss.
I didn't find it weird. I thought it was a little emotionally mature for high schoolers, but I didn't find it particularly weird. I do think adding that backstory is a really good add.
Yeah, I think that was a good add.
I know you.
Yeah, because it does help explain it a little bit. It gives that a little bit of fullness.
Yeah, but it also, I think, on top of that, helps. It's one of the things that, at least in the movie, seems to really help push Charlie down the path of finally dealing with his, because he says to her in that moment, like, we're more similar than you think. Like, I don't think, because we kind of dealt, or kind of always, the way it's expressed in the movie about his sexual assault history with his aunt is that he's repressed this, and his memories of her that we see for the first half of the movie are all very positive. And the way he portrays it to us as the audience is that, and he says to other people like, oh, I loved my aunt, she was my favorite, or whatever, and so it's very clearly that he has repressed this, and sort of part of the PTSD, or however you want to describe it, has hidden this away to where it's not a thing he deals with or thinks about her. But I feel like in that moment, it maybe somewhat remembers, or it strikes something in him when she tells him that story about her first kiss being some old guy. Because he says something to her about, like, them being similar or something like that. And I think that it not only adds to, or pushes him along his path, it also adds depth to their relationship.
No, I agree.
So, yeah.
One of the other themes in the book is the cycle of abuse.
Yeah.
Which I felt like maybe didn't come through as strongly in the movie for a couple of reasons. One of those reasons is that they cut a lot of scenes with his extended family. But I also think that arguably in the context of the movie and the book too, I guess, the scene with Sam also highlights the theme of the cycle of abuse. And hear me out here, she doesn't ask him if she can kiss him. She tells him.
Yeah.
And now...
That's fair.
To be fair, I think if he had said, no, I don't want to do that...
Oh, she wouldn't
have.
No.
But
you're right. Yeah. Yeah, she didn't ask. She was definitely being considerably older than him. I mean, considerably... she's 17 and he's 15 or 14.
He's 15, yeah. Okay. He gets his license over the course of the book.
But yeah, no, you're not necessarily wrong. I don't disagree.
No, she's older than him. He looks up to her.
Yeah.
He has a crush on her.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So when we find out what happened between Brad and Patrick before the big fight in the cafeteria, in the book we hear that secondhand from somebody. In the movie we hear it from Patrick. And I thought that was a good choice. Yeah,
that sounds like a change that makes sense.
Yes. Sure. And I mentioned briefly that they cut the stuff with his extended family. I think that's kind of 6 of 1. I think it was a good idea for time constraints and streamlining the narrative. But again, we lose some of the thematic stuff with like a history of mental illness and cycle of abuse, etc., etc. So like I said, kind of 6 of 1 there.
Yeah.
And that's all I have for better in the movie.
All right, well, let's tie up some loose ends and then get to the final verdict. All right, there's a couple more things. One, Emma Watson's accent. Am I crazy that I could hear it coming through her British accent? I think this is like her first American role, I think.
Because, like, her very first scene... And maybe it was like me hearing the accent and being put off by it. I don't know. But like that, it's like, especially that first scene at the football game, I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Because her acting was so weird to me.
I think she got progressively better and her accent became less noticeable throughout the film. And I do wonder if that was her first scene and she was still getting comfortable with the accent.
Because it was very like, it was not subtle.
No, I felt the same way, and it felt like she was very actively hiding her accent, like actively trying to...
like thinking about it.
Thinking about it, and it was causing issues. Now, I think she got more comfortable with it as it went on, and I actually think a lot of the moments, the scenes she has, she does a really good job, like eventually. But yeah, it was rough going at first. Speaking of our tropes, one of the things we mentioned was Dawson's casting.
Yes.
Which this movie is incredibly guilty of. If you didn't listen to the prequel episode, Dawson's casting is when a bunch of high schoolers are played by a bunch of 25-year-olds. And now, I don't. Some of them were close-ish, but they're still all way older. So when this was filmed in 2012, I only looked up 2. Emma Watson was probably like the closest to her actual age, I would bet.
Oh, really?
I would bet. I didn't look it up, but I bet that she was like the closest. But the main kid, the one that made me think of it and look up, that I had to look up because I was like, I'm pretty sure it was Mae Whitman. I'm like, I'm pretty sure Mae Whitman is much older than a high school age. And she was 24 when this was filmed. Which they have 2 people. I wonder if they have 2 people from Scott Pilgrim vs. the World in this movie, now that I think about it. Because Mae Whitman, who plays one of the ex-girlfriends, or ex-girlfriend in that instance, evil exes, in Scott Pilgrim, she's in it. But then also the football player in this movie is the other band member. He's Other Neil, or whatever his name is. Something Neil. Anyways, that is interesting. There's 2 people from Scott Pilgrim in this. Yeah, Mae Whitman was 24, and Logan Lerman was 20. Maybe 19 when this was filmed, so he was 4 or 5 years older. And yeah, Mae Whitman was like 8 years older. I bet Emma Watson was probably 20-ish.
Emma Watson is around my age.
Yeah, so 6 years ago. So yeah, 22, maybe 21, in that range.
Yeah.
So yeah, but they were all 20 and older.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely not high schoolers playing high schoolers. That's for sure.
But also, can we talk about, within the context of the story, all these college guys dating high schoolers?
Yeah, right?
Because, like, it happens in the book, too. And I'm like, I know that happens. I'm like, that's weird.
It's really weird.
Like, you couldn't have paid me enough to date a high schooler while I was in college.
Nuh-uh. False. Yeah. I mean, yeah. True. Not $1 million.
Like, and
So weird.
when I was a freshman, I knew one guy who was dating a senior in high school, and they had been...
Maybe that's the case with Sam and her boyfriend.
Maybe that's supposed to be,
because he's a freshman, I think, in college.
Yeah, but then the other guy who starts dating Mary Elizabeth is also in college and just starts dating him. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Go
weird.
date a college girl. Yeah. Jeez.
On the back on the point of weird things, was it common? Is this was another element that struck me as something that high schoolers don't really do, is putting on a live production of Rocky Horror Picture Show like every weekend at like their local theater.
So
like that's like feels like a college thing to me, not a high school thing. Maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, live showings like that of Rocky Horror they're a thing.
No, I'm aware they're a thing. I'm well aware that that's a thing.
I don't know of
it
any.
Just struck me as strange that they were all high schoolers doing the performance.
I don't know.
To a bunch of like random aged people. I don't know. That seems strange.
Yeah, you're right. That is a little weird, especially with the sexual nature of that
that's
show.
what I meant. The sexual nature of the show seems weird that it's all high schoolers doing it.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't know of anywhere where they do performances of that like as frequently as they do in this story. Yeah. Like I've really only heard it like as a once in a while thing. Like there's a Halloween showing and maybe a couple other ones.
Yeah. I thought that was very strange that it's all these high schoolers and they're not even in the drama club at their high school. Like they're not even, at least they don't make that implication that these are like the drama club people, which would make a little more sense, but still I thought it was strange.
Yeah, I don't know. And that is not further explained in the book. Right. That's just something that they do. So another thing that I want to bring up real quick, because the movie completely cuts this element from the book, and this is what I expected. So in the book, these characters are constantly smoking.
Oh.
Like they smoke all the time, like chimneys. And I anticipated that the movie would just that element cut it out.
I mean, they smoke weed occasionally, but...
Yeah, no, they're like always chain smoking cigarettes, which maybe would have been an indicator of time period.
Yeah, that was more of an indicator that it would put it more in the early 90s.
Yeah.
You know, back then when everybody smoked more.
And I will say that, at least the way I read it, I thought that the book used that to indicate kind of like Charlie's mental health deteriorating because he doesn't smoke at the beginning of the book. And then he starts and then like a couple pages later, he's like, I'm up to 10 cigarettes a day. And we're like, whoa, kid.
Yeah. Let's move along to the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first. Verdict afterward.
Katie, what's better, the book or the movie of The Perks of Being a Wallflower?
So I thought that this was a pretty good adaptation. It's fairly faithful.
I mean, it's the guy who wrote it. So.
Yeah. I mean, aside from losing a couple things, it's pretty faithful. I'm going to give it to the book, though.
Okay.
For a couple reasons. One is that I think the book did a better job of the through line on the mental health issues and the through line with some of the themes.
Okay.
The other thing is that because this book is about such a personal thing, I think it's a diary type format is maybe better for that.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think it's a fine adaptation. Mm-hmm. And I think that they did a really good job of making a lot of that come through.
Yeah.
I just think the book did it a little better.
All right. Well, there it is. Perks of Being a Wallflower. The book is better. But check out the movie. It's pretty good, too. In my opinion. I really enjoyed it.
The movie was pretty good. And like I said earlier, this book, it was hard to read. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah.
So if you give it a shot and you're not feeling it, no shame in putting it down.
And then check out the movie.
Yeah, watch the movie instead. Because the movie is a little more digestible.
Yeah, definitely. Katie, it's time to announce. We teased it. What are we doing next?
We teased it and nobody said anything
about our tease.
And I'm so disappointed.
I hope people noticed. I'm assuming people noticed. So at the end of the prequel episode last time, 2 times ago. It was the regular episode 2 times ago.
Last time. It was the Homeward Bound episode.
The end of the Homeward Bound episode, we teased it, and I laid in Hedwig's theme underneath our discussion very faintly. See if anybody would notice. If you did, you didn't say anything about it. Harry Potter.
Yes, we are.
It's coming. It's happening right during us moving. Brilliant.
Yay.
Planned that out perfectly. But yeah, Harry Potter is... I mean, by the time the main episode's out, we should be mostly moved, I think. But it's our next one, starting with the Philosopher's Stone, or the Sorcerer's Stone, as us Americans.
Depending on where you grew up.
As us here in America are wont to call it. So we'll have a prequel episode. Our schedule's going to be a little different for this. We're mostly going straight through with Harry Potter, with a couple breaks for other things here and there, like 2 times, I think.
We have like 2 or 3 breaks from Harry Potter scheduled.
And we'll put them in between some of the longer books to give us a little bit more time to read those. But yeah, we're jumping in. This is our first big series. We've been excited for it. It's a very important book series to both of us. I read all of them at least 4 or 5 times. I read the first 4 or 5 probably close to 20 times.
The first 4 I read near constantly growing up.
I read them twice a year.
Yeah.
Like, I would read them, and then when I got done, I would wait a couple months, and then I'd reread them. And then when a new one came out, I would just add it into the rotation. So yeah, I'm excited for it. The movies it's been a while since I've seen all of them, but I have seen all of them.
Yeah.
I like most of them, but I have a lot of problems with some of them, we'll say. At least I did the first time I saw them. I may be more generous on rewatching. I don't know. Especially now that we've sort of more versed in how things are adapted and the sort of concessions you have to make and why certain things are changed. I remember when I first saw The Goblet of Fire, I was mostly just livid the whole time. Even though there's a lot to like in it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because that was how I felt for big chunks of Deathly Hallows Part 2.
See, I remember liking both the Deathly Hallow ones pretty much, but it's been a while, so.
Yeah, it has been a while. I don't think I've seen either of the Deathly Hallows since they were in theaters.
Yeah, I think I've watched one of them once maybe. But Harry Potter, it's coming.
And our format is going to change up a little bit because we'll both be reading.
Yes. So we don't know exactly what we're going to do, but we're going to be dropping some segments. We won't be doing a Guess Who because we're both reading it.
Yeah, that seems silly.
We may come up with some other ways to add some things or get some other voices. We don't know yet. We're still figuring that out exactly, but I think the big thing we wanted to do is, since we both do love it so much, and we want to devote a lot of time, and I think this is what people will find most interesting, and you can tell me if you disagree, listener, that the thing people will find most interesting is our discussion of what was changed, why, and how we feel about that.
Yes.
I think that's the thing that I think most people, when they watch the movies, if they've read the books, are the most passionate about.
Yes.
Why did they change this? How dare they change this? This, that, and the other. So I think that main part of our discussion every episode is going to be that. Sort of the better in the book, better in the movie.
Right.
Writ the whole episode, kind of. So yeah, that's that. Harry Potter. Until next time, guys, gals, non-binary, and everybody else, keep reading books, keep watching movies, keep rating us on iTunes, Stitcher, and anywhere else you download our fine podcast, and come back next week when we preview Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Heading off to Hogwarts.